Joining us now is Attorney General Keith Ellison. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it here, scrambling at the last minute after that presser.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for having me on.
Sure. So we did run the press conference in its entirety from noon until about 12:30. So we had plenty of time sort of to hear your side of things. And if you're okay with it, we kind of put a call out because I think a lot of times coming out of these press conferences, the reporters get to ask some questions, but there are people just out in the community who have questions as well, and they don't get a
it's a good idea.
line to you. So if you don't mind sifting through some of these here and just asking some of the questions on behalf of some of the viewers who've been watching. So I guess one of the first ones, as we talk about this, is concern over cost. The question is, how much will all of these lawsuits, meaning not just this one, but some of the others that have been filed against the Trump administration, cost taxpayers?
Well, the Minnesota Attorney General's office is a constitutional office in the Minnesota State Constitution dedicated to defending the rights of Minnesotans. And so our annual budget is what it is, and we use it to defend Minnesotans' rights of all kinds, certainly consumer protection, certainly in the area of representing our governmental agencies, certainly in a criminal prosecution. So, it'll essentially, the cost is the staff who work on the matter. And I don't have a fixed number for that at this time, but we'll certainly be happy to get back with you after I ask our folks to tabulate that.
And again, a lot of times when we're asking these questions, some of it requires data dives too as well. So we can definitely follow up another time. I'm going to throw some at you that you may not have the numbers like right off of your head, but just kind of,
sure.
I don't want to sift through too much here and be able to ask the questions. Another one is coming from a viewer who says, if Minnesota does win this lawsuit against the Trump administration, will President Trump himself face any sort of criminal charges for bullying?
No. All we're trying to do is maintain Minnesota law and federal law. We believe Title IX does not allow discrimination on the basis of sex, and neither does the Minnesota State Human Rights Act. We're just basically asking to be left alone. And so, no, there won't be any consequences for him. We just want to make sure that our state can stand on its own law that the legislators have passed.
Okay, I want to ask you about Title IX, which is kind of at the heart of this. And again, I know some of this is going to require some additional support from people who are studying, things a little bit more closely. But some of the questions that are coming in revolve around Title IX. And one of the questions is, why is Title IX for protecting trans youth and not for protecting women? What do you say to that?
I'd say it does. Certainly, Title IX protects all Americans on the basis of sex. You get to have your rights, and your sex cannot be used against you, and that involves trans people too. So that's the answer.
And kind of a related question is a comment/question is someone who says that they believe that sports should be separated by biological sex. This person says nobody is saying that trans kids can't be in sports. The concern is infringing on the rights of girls and women.
Yeah, I just think I disagree with their definition of what the sports. And if a child identifies as one sex or another, they should be able to participate as the way they see themselves and their gender identity. So, and that's what the law is in the state of Minnesota. People can change it. I don't think they should, but they can. But what the law says is that kids get to participate. So we're standing up for that right.
And I think that's an important differentiation that is just sort of based in fact, which is that the Minnesota Human Rights law it identifies through gender identity. That law uses gender identity, whereas Title IX, and I've heard some attorneys talk about this, and I'd be curious to get your take on it. Even I think you addressed it a little bit in the press conference, but other attorneys who we've had on the show have said that as they've looked at Title IX, it's not as clear to them what the definition is. If it's biological, they say that it doesn't address gender identity. It's more biological. So there's this sort of side issue that is really important here in all of this, which is the idea of do you look at gender identity? Do you look at biological gender? And that's almost running parallel to all of these other issues.
Yeah, well, that's going to be one of the issues that gets sorted out in this lawsuit. We believe that Title IX says that you can't discriminate against people on the basis of their sex. We know that the Minnesota State Human Rights Law says that. That does protect transgender people as well, and so that's what we're standing on. But another important issue, Amy, that I really hope that people pay attention to, is that the federal government is literally trying to tell the state of Minnesota what its law is. And it's so to a certain extent, it's just a matter of us being for protecting our right to be able to make the decisions that the legislature has already made. And so that's part of this too. It's of course everybody goes right to the gender issue, but there's another important issue of under the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which says that the state of Minnesota is a sovereign and has the right to write its own laws.
And so one of the other questions that I've seen a couple of times here is what would win over federal law? Does that supersede state law? Is a question that a lot of people have.
Well, it's sort of in our constitutional scheme, the 10th Amendment devotes certain specific things to the federal government, others to the state, everything else to the state. And so there's a limitation on what the federal government can make the state do. What they're saying is that because that their interpretation of their law is supersedes our law, and I'm saying that actually Title IX and the Minnesota Human Rights Law are consistent. Their interpretation is incorrect, and I think we're going to prevail. But I don't see this as a conflict of Title IX and Minnesota Human Rights Act. I'm arguing that they are harmonious, and it's the federal government because of political ideological reasons that wants to make the opposite argument.
If I could ask a question based upon an interview that I did just this past week with a local criminal defense attorney who has handled Title IX cases, pretty high-profile cases. His suggestion was, because it was right after sort of the Pam Bondi Maine lawsuit, his suggestion was, is there a place where the state of Minnesota could come to a compromise or negotiate some sort of resolution with the federal government here? Why the lawsuit? Is there room for both parties to walk away saying, I like this, I don't like this, and this side says, I like this, I don't like this, and we move on? Is that a possibility?
Well, Amy, let me be clear. We're always open to a conversation, but we cannot compromise on people's basic human rights. That we cannot compromise on. As long as the Trump administration is willing to work something out that protects the rights of Minnesota kids, we're open to a dialogue.
Okay. I have a pretty specific question here. I'm curious. It's from a parent from the Moorhead School District who says a biological male recently took first place in the girls' triple jump and is now in the school records for 3 girls' events. No one wants to see kids bullied or denied opportunities, but is it fair to the girls who have trained hard only to lose out to athletes with clear biological advantages? From their perspective, couldn't this be considered a form of bullying?
Well, I'm at a disadvantage because that particular case I'm not aware of. I do know of other children in that school district who are, 10, 9, 11, and they don't really care about winning. They just want to be on the team. We're talking about kids who have always identified as female, never have identified any other way, and they just want to be on the team. And because they want to run and jump like all kids do. And so, I mean, the caller called in on that situation. I'll study that one. But the situation I do know about is a child who probably isn't going to win the race. Maybe they will, who knows? But they're not there for the purpose of, trophies and medals. They're there just because they want to be a member of the team and learn something about sportsmanship and teamwork and cooperation, which is really the real lessons of sports.
We had quite a few comments from people, and I wanted to just share one of them because I think I felt sort of a genuine curiosity here, and we told people the rules of the game were you can ask whatever you want as long as it's respectful, right?
Right.
And we appreciate you being open to answering these things. So this person says, is there room for someone who is concerned about the safety and well-being of a trans kid and is concerned that girls' and women's rights, in some cases safety, is being threatened. Where do I fall in this very divisive space?
Well, I definitely appreciate the caller's question. You know what I would say is just let's continue to engage this conversation, ask more questions, do some research, call groups who know a lot about this kind of thing. I don't blame people for sort of making up their minds on this. All I can tell you is that the transgender athlete I met, who's an 11-year-old kid who just wants to be on the team, is just a kid. They're just a kid in every way, and they're just trying to figure out how to exist, how to thrive with all of the challenges of any 11-year-old, plus being a little different from the standpoint of being a transgender child. And so that's what I can tell you. I mean, and I would say, please do continue to ask the questions, continue to engage this issue. Let me just remind people, we are talking about a very small number of people. I'm not sure we even have more than 10. I think we probably have about that, or maybe even fewer. And then when you divide them into trans boys or trans girls, you're even talking about a smaller number still. So I think that it is important to understand that our society and the Trump administration is literally making a massive deal out of very small number of children who are trying to play sports. I know in Maine, I think they had 2 transgender athletes in the whole state that this was all about. So let's keep that in mind, and we are talking about kids as young as 5 and 6 years old. We're talking about kids 11, 12. People want to emphasize some 18, 19-year-old kid or somebody else. No, we're talking about junior high and lower kids often. And so I ask people to keep that in mind too.
And as we're talking about sort of how young some of these students or these athletes, these children are, one of the comments was addressing something that was said during the press conference, and I don't remember who said it. It might have been the doctor who was there,
Perhaps.
who said, was asked about competitive advantage, and the doctor had said that science supports that there is no competitive advantage. And so the question was, is there even enough science? Are we at a place where that is something that can be said so definitively?
Yeah, I think that comment was made by Dr. Leonard Smith. And what I would ask people to do is just, I don't know, send an email, right? Ask the question. I think there is I don't think that the people who are exploring this from a scientific standpoint are afraid of a tough question. I think you should make that question and expect a good answer.
Yeah. The questions are kind of varied here and all over the place, and we're just throwing them at you in real time.
No, it's all right.
That's something we normally do, so appreciate you being willing to be here and answering these. But as I said, when we played the 30 minutes of that news conference with any issue, there are always questions on the other side that we want to make sure and get across.
It's called democracy.
Yeah, gives us an opportunity to sort of talk things through and understand different points of view on this. So one of the things that stuck out to me was a question that was asked by a reporter, and they said, as you look at maybe the reason that President Trump was elected, as you look at so-called popular opinion, as you look at the way that that opinion has shifted over the years, I guess the question from the reporter was essentially, is this the hill that your career will die on? And I was curious about your answer to that.
Yeah, well, I guess my answer is that I swear an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, state of Minnesota, and all the laws. That's what I'm doing. I didn't run just to be able to stay in office. I ran for Attorney General because I wanted to uphold everyone's rights. And that's what's primary for me. As I make a decision about what cases that this office is going to pursue, I never factor in my electoral consequences. I just do the best I can with what I got. And I'll also say this: do we really want people's constitutional rights to be a matter of polling, right? I guarantee you that in 1961, if you were to do a poll on whether or not we should get rid of Jim Crow, that poll might not have came out the way that we would have hoped it would in 2025. Now, I can tell you that when Martin Luther King died, he was actually pretty unpopular, and yet today streets are named after him, a national holiday is named after him. I guess my point is that sometimes you just have to follow the dictates of your conscience and let the consequences come out how they come out.
Just wanted to share another comment that just came in, and this person is, and I'll kind of paraphrase here just a little bit, but I think I'm going to get to the point here, which is, the federal government, you have said, has sort of this ideological bend, and they're saying, but it seems like you may have one as well, or the state of Minnesota, which is run by Democrats right now, the DFL has one as well. How much of this is grandstanding and sort of puffing chests and at taxpayers' expense?
Well, let me just remind everybody, it was the federal government through Pam Bondi and the president who said they're going to take rights away from Minnesotans, who said they're going to exclude them and deprive them and going to punish the state because we, as a state, allow equal representation and allow equal rights for all and don't discriminate on the basis of sex. It wasn't me. I mean, as a matter of fact, I would have been very happy to not be in the situation where I have to defend Minnesotans' rights this way. But it was actually the federal government that said that they're going to bring this case and they're about to bring this case. So let's be clear. It is the federal government bringing and initiating this. I have a couple of letters that I could show to you that pretty much promise that they're going to sue us. So I just didn't wait around for them to sue us. I just took them at their word and believed them when they said they were going to sue us. And then they said it again on the 16th of April as they were suing Maine for the same thing. So that's sort of the story.
And Attorney General Ellison, what's at stake for Minnesota if they were successful and they were to win a lawsuit against us?
Well, what's at stake is that they would try to if the executive order from President Trump ends up being the law of the land, it would mean that transgender people would not be able to, and not people, but even children, kids, would be excluded from participation in extracurricular activities, including sports. It would mean that it could mean that they would try to deprive the state of some funding because we stand up for the rights of all students to participate. And that's what it could mean.
As you look at kind of what's happened in Maine, what sort of funding are they targeting? And again, I'm kind of asking.
Well, a lot of the funding doesn't have anything to do with transgender issues. I mean, the Department of Justice does run a lot of grant programs. There are certain grants that have to do with law enforcement, public safety, all kinds of different kind of grants that are administered by the Department of Justice, and some of them have absolutely nothing to do with this issue, and yet they're threatening that funding as well. And so, look, that is at stake. That's the kind of funding that's at stake. But some of it has to do with law enforcement. Some of it has to do with other critical issues that the grants have to do with. And again, not about bathrooms or transgender issues or anything like that.
Can I take you back to one of the things we just talked about a couple of minutes ago, which is the idea of some sort of a compromise here. And the idea is that, if you were to be sitting in a room with President Trump and you were to actually just have a conversation and not both sides sort of launching, comments through the airwaves,
Sure.
What would you say to him, and where are areas that you might look at compromising?
Well, first I'd say, look, the federal government has things that it is in control of, and the state has things it's control of. Why don't you stay in your lane and I'll stay in mine? And we'd see where we go from there. I try to tell them personal stories about parents and kids who I know and have come to know, who are just trying to be a part of the student body and be normal kids as much as they can. And I try to help them understand that there's a very human toll to what he's advocating, and try to sensitize him to the reality of an 11-year-old kid who's being told you can't be you can't play soccer because the president said so, or somebody doesn't like you being transgender girl. And I try to help him understand that this means something. I try to help him understand that transgender folks have some of the highest incidents of depression, anxiety, and even suicide, are often bullied, are often beat up. And being a part of youth sports is something that helps give them some sense of belonging and a sense of, confidence. And then I'd listen to what he had to say, because quite honestly, um, I'm not really sure why the president is concerned with making sure that some 11-year-old kid can't play softball.
And I think what he would say is he's protecting the rights of the girls and women who he believes the rights are being violated, right?
Yeah, he might say that, but then he'd have to show me whose rights have been violated. He'd have to prove that, right? But I can prove that kids have been kicked off the team. I can prove that kids have been excluded. And I can prove the number of transgender people have been attacked, who've been even murdered and killed, and people who suffer great mental and emotional peril because of their exclusion and isolation in our society. Mm-hmm. I can prove my case. I would like to see him prove his.
What do you think about people like Riley Gaines, who we've had on the show when they were rallying at the Capitol a couple of months ago? Girls and women who we've seen, sometimes videos are circulated of a volleyball player, who has a ball smashed, in her face and it is physically harmed. When you see those types of videos, does that play into this at all for you, or?
Yeah, I'm really just gonna have to go back to what the Minnesota law says. I'll leave you and your viewers and other people to discuss what happened in one video, but what I have to do is stand on what the law is and uphold the law for all Minnesotans.
Okay. I'll give you the last word here. We appreciate you coming on and being open to answering anything in real time with us. Is there anything else
Sure.
that you'd like to sort of end with?
I just want to say, look, we're bringing this lawsuit because the Trump administration has promised us that it was going to sue us for our own Minnesota policy. And the basis of the lawsuit is to try to stop the federal government from the very top from bullying kids and children in our state. And that's our goal.
Okay. Attorney General Keith Ellison, thanks for joining us. Quite a response from people who don't have a direct line to you, who have a lot of questions about a lot of things that don't have anything to do with this. So as I'm looking at my notes here, maybe we can have you come on again and we can talk about some other topics as well, if you're game for that.
You bet. You let me know.
All right. Thank you, Attorney General Keith
Bye
Ellison.
now.
We appreciate your time.